I spent the night in my car by the sea, only to wake up to a mysterious white mist slowly approaching me, which then took the shape of a human. Terrified, I found myself unable to move. Thank you for your subscription and likes. What would you do if it were you? You can leave your thoughts in the comments section. It's probably not a good idea to sleep out by the sea in your car. I can say this firsthand, as I've had a frightening experience when I tried it. My family home is on a small island which is surrounded by the sea. So growing up, I used to ride the ferry on a near-daily basis whenever we needed to go shopping. We needed to get on the ferry. Basically one afternoon, my older brother asked me if I wanted to go to a mall on the mainland with him. So we borrowed the ferry and had a great day out. We had such a good time that I guess we lost track of time because we ended up missing the last ferry home. There were hotels and inns we could have stayed in, but we weren't exactly rich at the time, plus we just blew through a load of money on shopping out of options. We reluctantly decided to spend the night in the car at the nearby parking lot which faced the sea. We knew that the first ferry home would come in at about 6:30 a.m., so it wouldn't be that long of a time to wait. I knew that I would probably not get a wink of sleep, especially since my brother is a snorer. However, I did manage to get some shut-eye after some time. I woke up in a bit of a daze not knowing where I was. That's such a weird feeling. I looked around. I had a pain in my neck, which was to be expected when sleeping in a chair. Of course, I noticed something out at sea. There was this white swirling mist. It seemed to be slowly approaching. Was it fog? I asked myself. I didn't think so, as there wasn't any rolling fog banks in the area. Isolated fog doesn't exist. Does it? Well, I guess maybe it could have been smoke. Then again, I asked myself, kind of odd to see smoke on the water. Steam would be more like it, but it was a cold night. Well, it felt cold in my brother's car. I couldn't make my mind up about what I was seeing, so I just kept watching. It was mesmerizing. Before long, I watched it as it slowly morphed into the shape of a human. That was when fear replaced curiosity for me. I thought that I was seeing something supernatural or otherworldly at the moment that thought entered my mind. I went to shake my brother awake because I began to panic. I was unable to move, though I couldn't turn to face my brother. I couldn't move a single finger. I was frozen in the passenger seat. This was the first time in my life I experienced this kind of paralysis. I mean, I say paralysis because I've heard of sleep paralysis, but I want to tell you I wasn't asleep in my experience, so I'm unsure of what to call it. I had to somehow wake up my brother. I didn't know how I was going to do that, as I was unable to even blink my eyes or make a sound. All the while I was panicking. This white misty figure was approaching the car. I was thinking, what do we do if it gets in the car? What can I do then? To my surprise, it stopped at the edge of the water. It just stopped, and then it slowly faded away into the night air. As soon as it disappeared, I was released from the invisible binds I had suffered. I immediately shook my brother awake and I explained to him what I had just witnessed. I expected him not to believe me and even laugh at me, but he said that he felt as if the area we parked in had a bad vibe to it. He said he had a gut feeling about it. Over the years, my brother has theorized that the white misty humanoid shape that I had seen out by the water might have been the soul of someone who had taken their life by jumping from a nearby bridge. Some legends say that those pass on at sea can't make it back to the land, and maybe that's why I saw that figure fade away at the shoreline. If that's the case, that sure is sad. My brother loves scary stories and anything to do with the occult, so he just loves telling this story of my experience. He seems proud of it. I, on the other hand, really don't know how to feel or what to feel. If I'm being honest, one thing for sure is that the terrifying feeling of being unable to move is something I'll never forget. I'm an old man now, but this happened when I was younger. I wanted to share this story just in case it helps someone. I drove to a remote tourist location one night and parked in its parking lot. I was alone and at a bit of a loose end, who didn't have much going on that night. I think it was about 8:00 p.m. when I started to get a little drowsy. I ended up falling asleep. I don't know how long I was asleep for, but I eventually woke up at the sound of tapping at the window. I woke up with a stiff neck and I turned my head to the direction the tapping came from. There was a woman stood by my driver's side door. She was desperately tapping at the window. She looked pretty young and she was alone. I was really confused, since I was groggy after just waking up. She was speaking, but I couldn't hear. So I opened the window a little and in a frantic voice, she pleaded with me to help her and to hurry up and open the door. She said that she had been chased by a man. I was sure that it was real, despite having just woke up at one point. I thought for the briefest of moments that I might have seen a ghost, but then that thought was banished instantly. It was real and it was happening. I hurriedly went to unlock and open the door to help her, but then for some reason I hesitated. Something just felt off. Something felt a little strange about it all. For instance, her hair, makeup and clothes were in perfect order. There wasn't a hair out of place on her head. None of her makeup ran, and if you were being chased, you would expect to sweat right. Something just didn't add up here. She was good at looking frantic and frightened to an extent, but somehow it seemed forked to me. It was like she knew what she was going to say before she said it, like it was a bit of an act. I looked around from inside the car and I didn't see anyone else in the vicinity. No other cars in the parking lot either. I felt scared at that point. A part of me really wanted to help because if it was me and her shoes or any of my family members, then I would want to count on the kindness of a stranger. But I just wasn't buying her story. I decided to start my engine just in case. I figured that I could use the help of my headlights to see if there was any truth to her claims. I didn't see anything in front of my car, but when I went to adjust my rear view mirror, something caught my eye. I saw several figures. They were all male by the look of them, and they were crouched behind my car like they were runners at a starting block. When I saw the woman's quick glance back to them, once she realized I had seen them, I stepped on the gas. I fled it and I got out of that car park. It was pretty difficult to drive initially, because I had adjusted my seat to sleep earlier. When I was far enough away from the car park, I checked the time and I found it was just after 2:00 a.m. I remember thinking that those men were probably trying to hide in my blind spot. They knew exactly what they were doing. If I had unlocked the door, I think at the very least I would have been robbed. Maybe something worse might have happened. I don't know. That night taught me to park in places that are well lit and close to surveillance cameras. I tend to park in the center of parking lots these days. From that day forth, I didn't sleep in my car in sketchy areas like that parking lot again. If I sleep in my car, I want to be somewhere where there's lots of lights, restrooms, vending machines, and cameras. In any case, the one massive plus I take away from that night was the fact that woman didn't need my help. She wasn't abducted or chased. I hate her for being so devious, but I'm glad she wasn't in danger. I suppose be careful out there, please, people. I went out on a trip in the mountains with my wife and we saw something that I'll never forget. I don't think my wife will ever forget it either. It took place in Okama. We were on a trip in the middle of nowhere. Pretty much I was driving and it gets darker quicker than you realize out in the sticks. You know, it was the middle of the night. I had left later than I wanted to. There was a whole thing I don't want to get into going on at the time. We drove on winding roads and unfortunately we got a little lost. I'm not no country kid, so I didn't really know all the ins and outs of the back road. So I guess that's why we ended up getting a little off course. I followed the maps as best I could. But stuff happens. I thought we were on track, but it turned out we weren't, and unbeknownst to me, we were heading for further and further into the mountainous woods, and I had no clue how to find my way home or even to our destination. I remember arriving at a school which had become disused. I guess disused is a word I picked up from my wife because to me it looked abandoned. There was a rusted sign and it read something elementary school. Beyond that sign was a chain-link fence, and beyond that was unknown to me. We had no choice. The Saab had failed us again, so we had to go back the way we came. Now this is where things get pretty weird and, frankly, unbelievable. Well, unless you're me and my wife, so let me explain. I pulled away from that abandoned school in the mountains. I guess it could have been a forestry school or something to do with scouts. I don't know. Anyways, I pulled away from that place and I did my 3-point turn in my car and we went back to the way we came. After about 5 or 6 minutes of driving down on the road, I found myself approaching the same darn school gates I had just seen a while ago. It was a real head-scratcher, man. I didn't know how I wound up back where I was earlier driving away from. It didn't make any sense to me. But no matter how many 3-point turns I did in my car and no matter how many times I pulled away from those rusted school gates, I found myself returning to them. It was pretty freaky. I have to say we were at a complete loss. It got to the point where I believe we both stopped blaming the Sativ and we had to admit to ourselves that we were experiencing something very unusual. I mean, human error can only account for so much, right? Even with an extremely error-prone human like myself, I mean, we couldn't get off that road. It just seemed impossible. It got to the point where it got so late and I got so tired that the best option seemed for us to pull over and sleep in the car that night. Neither of us wanted to do that, and this story would be 10 times longer if I sat here and wrote my lady's complaints about the night anyways. We eventually made an agreement to head down the mountain pass as soon as day broke. In the light of day, we would surely not make the same mistakes we had been making before by ending up back at that school. Lucky for me, I packed a couple of beers for the trip, and Lord have mercy, I needed a couple to take the edge off. I popped a few tall boys and let loose for a while playing some music we both liked. After a while, I guess no more than 5 songs or so, I ended up blur-eyed and sleepy. Driving takes it out of you, man. I woke up during the night to my partner's scream. Cut through me like a knife through butter. It scared the hell out of me to hear her scream like that when I opened my eyes. It was already bright outside and I got the shock of my life when I saw loads of little handprints on my driver's side window, the windshield, and even the passenger side window. It looked like someone had been approaching the car whilst we slept. I was so freaked out, I have to admit it. What with everything that happened the night before. My wife was freaking out too. I was trying to calm her down, but I just couldn't. She said she had a bad feeling about the whole area. Well, I couldn't really do much to remedy that, so I was trying my best to bring some sanity and some stability to the situation. But boy, did she take some time to come around. I thought the best thing to do to stop all the mayhem would be to pop out of the car and wipe those windows down. No hints then, no freakouts. I thought I grabbed the chamois leather in my driver's side door and I hopped out of the car and I set about wiping off all those handprints. I started buffing the outside windows and windshield, but the handprints weren't going anywhere. So I tried harder and I even got a spray out of the boot of the car, but the smudges those little hands had created weren't moving. Then I heard my partner say something that lives with me. The handprints are on the inside. I sensed the terror in her voice and I felt a shudder go through me. I scrambled back in the car, wiped everywhere on the inside, and I floored it out of there. Hands down the scariest night of my life. We just went straight home. We didn't even bother finishing the trip. This happened a long time ago, roughly 22 or 23 years ago. I've recently found these message boards and I enjoy reading about your creepy experiences. So I've decided to share mine. I was a single man at the time this happened and I loved going on long drives roughly once a month. It was mid-autumn and I decided to go for a drive after work. I headed to a spot I liked a lot at the time. I worked a job that allowed me to finish early on Fridays. If I made up enough hours throughout the week, well, usually I would have finished earlier, but there was a deadline I needed to work to, so I had to stay later than expected. I'm quite a stubborn person and I was looking forward to my monthly drive, so I was going to go on my monthly drive. Just because I was heading off later than I expected didn't mean that it wouldn't be fun. My destination was a convenience store which was about 2 hours away. The roads were really nice and there were some winding roads and highways which allowed me to get up some speed. I arrived at the convenience store and I parked in one of the corner spots. That store was a little unusual because it had a large number of parking bays. I think that convenience store owner bought the piece of land that it sits on and previously that piece of land probably belonged to a hotel or something like that. Well, that's my guess anyway. So I liked using that store as my marker to head back. I would park up, get a drink, some snacks, or even take a quick nap. Well, since it was autumn and it was night hour, I thought I would take a nap until the sun came up. I kept a sleeping bag in my car for situations just like that. I locked my doors and my windows. I was a lot more tired than I thought, so it didn't take me long to get to sleep, but before I went to sleep I reclined my seat and then I drifted into a dreamless sleep. I was suddenly jolted awake when I felt a pair of hands grab my shoulders from behind and attempt to pull me backwards. I immediately thought this cannot be possible. I locked the doors and I'm alone in the car. What the heck is happening? I was in a state of absolute confusion and shock. In the chaos of me clinging and pulling forward, I heard something that still gives me chills to this day, when I think back to its 23 years on and I still can't get it out of my head. I heard a woman laugh, despite being alone in the car, and that laughter slowly decreased in volume until it completely faded out. I looked in my rear-view mirror and I didn't see anyone behind me. I knew that I wouldn't, because I knew I was alone. I got out of the car in a panic and I stood by the side of it taking deep breaths. I was shaking with fear. I had no explanation for what had just happened. I had a flashlight in my car, so I grabbed that. I wanted to be in the light. I was shining it around the parking lot hoping to see something, some sense of something normal, to take my mind off what had happened. My flashlight's light fell on an old tattered poster which had been tied to the chain-link fence, and it read something like this information: needed body of foreign national female found inside suitcase, suspect and victim unidentified. My heart sank. I thought that the hands I felt and the laughter I had heard might have belonged to the woman if this was her unfortunate final resting place. One thing I will say is that the woman who grabbed me did not feel like she did it out of anger or hatred. I know how crazy I must sound right now, but stay with me for a second. She grabbed me in such a way that I felt like she was teasing me like a big sister would. That being said, it was still scary as hell and I was a nervous wreck at the time. I didn't want to get back on the road because I was so tired. I regretted going on a drive so late. I was so annoyed at myself. I went to the convenience store, bought a bottle of tea, used the bathroom and went back to my car with little other options available. I did the following: I poured a little of my tea out by the car and said, "Please, can you let me sleep a little while longer?" And then I got back into my car and tried to get some more rest. Amazingly, I fell asleep without much issue and I didn't wake up again until morning came. I guess she let me sleep through the night. I have mixed feelings about that night. It was scary, but it was kind of a nice memory. This happened when I finished work early one afternoon. I had the sudden urge to go for a long drive. I went home and quickly got ready to head out. I left home by the evening. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just got on the highway and picked random streets and roads to turn off on. I remember turning off the satellite navigation. I don't know what got into me that day. I just felt like disappearing. I wanted to get away from everything and be someplace new. It was a really fun and spontaneous drive. I stopped off at some random restaurants along my travels. I had some udon noodles and they were really nice. As I was moving away from the cities and towns, I saw more of the countryside, which was great to see. I saw wild vegetables growing and stopped to check them out. They looked pretty tasty to me. I drove for a long while, almost through 2 prefectures, when my sense of adventure slowly waned. I checked the dashboard clock and it was coming up to 1:00 a.m. To be honest, it was later than I expected. I found roadside station along the national highway and I decided to pull in and sleep in my car for a few hours. I had planned on sleeping in the car that night, so it wasn't a big deal. I was prepared. I used the roadside station's bathroom to brush my teeth, and then I pulled the sun visors down on the windshield and I used this piece of cardboard. I kept in the car to kind of block out the street light. I wedged it under the sun visors and it pretty much covered the windshield. It wasn't the brightest night, but the main idea with the cardboard was to stop people looking in at me. I managed to block everything but the rear seat window behind me. I had an idea to cover that window, though I hung my jacket on the little hanger thing and thought that would be enough to put people off looking in on me. With everything in place, I got ready to go to sleep. I think that because of the mood I was in, I found it really difficult to sleep that night. I couldn't shake that sense of adventure I had in me. I was restless. I decided to search for local restaurants and sightseeing spots. I was already excited to see what else I could see on my travels. I then heard my jacket begin to slip off the hanger it was on behind me. It was a pretty heavy jacket, so it made a noise as it slipped. I spun around to look at it as it was falling and I got the shock of my life. I turned and locked eyes with a complete stranger staring at me. It was a man and he was staring at me with this emotionless cold glare. It really shocked me to see him staring like that. It was frightening as well. I paused for a moment, staring back at this guy's pale white face, unable to believe what was happening. I got my smartphone out because something strange was happening with his face. It looked like it was moving, kind of pulsating and morphing its shape. So I turned my smartphone's flashlight on and it lit up the dark car. I then aimed the direction of the light at the back window, and in that moment the face that had been staring at me disappeared. I sat there for a couple of seconds in complete disbelief and then I unlocked my door. I don't know if this was the best decision I could have made that night, but I did it nonetheless. I looked all around and shone my torch in all directions, but I could not find the owner of that pale face I saw peering in at me in my car. There was no one there. Was that a living person I saw? I asked myself. I couldn't answer that question, though I've never been a believer in the paranormal, but that is something that really made me consider the possibilities. To this day, I have no explanation for what I saw. I drove to another parking lot after I saw that there was no chance that I could have fallen asleep again there in that parking lot that night. My hobby is sleeping in my car. I like to do it on days before public holidays. I don't want people to see me. Usually, if they do, they just report me to the police, and the police just usually want me to move on. If it's not the police, then it's the youngsters. They peer into my car windows. This makes choosing a perfect spot all that much more difficult. It was around summer of last year. It was late at night and I was just driving around trying to find a decent place to sleep. I was on a mountain road and I saw a turning for what looked like a disused building. The old rusty sign told me that this used to be an observatory. I saw a truck in the car park. He must be taking a rest too. I thought as I pulled in. Perfect. There was another truck in the car park too. I parked away from the trucks in the middle of the car park. I pulled out my phone and played with it until I became sleepy. I then put the seat all the way back and pulled my blanket over me and fell asleep out in the elements. I woke up during the night because my throat was dry. I went to grab my drink from my bag, and just as I did, I heard a small stone or something strike the back of my car, the rear windshield. I looked in my rear view mirror and there was nothing there. I guessed it might have been a bug or something. It's not uncommon. I took a drink and I went back to sleeping. The second time I woke up was because I really needed the restroom. I looked at my phone 427. I got out of the car. I kind of hoped that the abandoned OBS observatory had a toilet, but it didn't. I didn't want to climb over a fence and wander around in the middle of the night in there to find another one either. So I found a spot out of the way and relieved myself. As I was doing so, I heard one of the truck doors open and shut. Someone else was awake. As I came back to my car, I saw him stood there. He looked to be about my age. He wore glasses. He couldn't sleep last night, right, huh? We scared of something. I looked at him a bit puzzled and asked, "What do you mean?" "Huh, you didn't notice?" Then I was a bit spooked by his response. He began to elaborate. He said that he was watching a DVD. When I pulled into the parking area, he thought that it was a bit odd, since truckers almost exclusively use this place to park up and take a rest. When the DVD was finished, he looked up and noticed a woman stood in front of my car with her hands on the hood. He said that seeing this freaked him out. He took his eyes off the woman for just a second, and when he looked back, she was at my driver's side window. He said that when she noticed him looking her way, she ducked down by the side of my car. He kept checking on me after a while, but he couldn't see the woman anymore. He then went to sleep in the back of his truck after checking all his doors were locked. I thought he was just trying to freak me out, so I questioned him. He said that if I didn't believe him, then I should go check my window for handprints, as she had her hands cued against the glass when she came by the side of my car. He came with me to check my window to see if there would be handprints. There wasn't any. I thought at this point it might have been a kind of thing that truckers did to make sure us non-truckers didn't use their parking spots or something. But then we went to check the hood and there was something there, a small pair of indentations at the front of the car. I was pissed. I heard the trucker then shout, "Hey, there's something worse around the back, buddy." There were scratches and another little indentation, as if something had struck it. I heard the door of the truck open and close, and an older man came over. He said that he had seen her before. She's been here. Before she did the same thing to me my first night here. I thought that she was just after some company, but she never said a word. She just stared. I asked a local about her in a bar down that road there. Turns out she does it all the time, but only to newcomers at the parking lot. It's fine, though she won't hurt you. I looked at the other truck driver in shock and I hightailed it out of there. I couldn't handle it. Knowing how dark and isolated we were in that location was enough for someone to arrive on foot out in the middle of nowhere in the dead of night, just to mess with me. Nope, I had to go. Hi guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel, please, thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and enjoyed the video, please press like, leave a comment, share the video, and please subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. I'll see you soon.